Welcome into the show, everyone. I'm your host, Unhinged Father. Hope you're having a glorious day so far. Great week. Got a solo episode for you today. I hope you enjoyed the quick hit fit earlier this week, doing some of those smaller episodes to kind of wet your whistle before you get the longer episodes on Friday. So let's go ahead and jump into today's episode. For today's episode, I'm going to be talking about something that's been weighing pretty heavily on my mind, something that I've been thinking about quite a bit, obviously having the two young rascals running around. This episode's going to be focused more so on parenthood, being a father, raising children, so possibly a little bit more geared towards the parents in my audience. But that being said, I think that this episode could be something you want to listen to if you're planning on having kids someday, or even if you just, were a kid of a mom, a dad, you want to have a little bit of an insight into potentially what they were going through when they were raising you, or even what they may feel nowadays. So I hope that you enjoy it. It's an episode that, like I said, something that's been really on my mind as of late. And the aspect of parenthood that I'm talking about is really just the feeling of, am I doing a good job of raising my kids? How do I know that what I'm doing is the right thing? How do I know that what I'm doing is going to lead my kids to a life that's happy, content, blessed, whatever you want to say, and, not down the road of them becoming serial killers? It's a real question. It's something you're always wondering in the back of your head. How bad am I fucking my kids up? Are the things that you're doing differently than what your parents did in the past? Are the things that you read about or incorporating, or just your instincts, are all of these things actually good for your kids? Are you creating good little humans, productive people that are going to be in society? Or are you fostering bad habits? Are you coddling them too much? Are you not creating resilience in them? There's just so many different ways that your mind can go. And in all honesty, it's anxiety inducing. I mean, I struggle with it. I want to be a good dad. I want to be the best dad there is. Not everyone would say that he's the best dad. I would never say that I'm the best dad. Other people, they may say he's the best dad. But how do I really know? How do you really know if you're being the best dad or mom that you can be? There is no standard rubric there you could just put your kid up against, a wall with a chart next to it and be like, oh yeah, here we go. Hitting this one. We could work a little bit here, work a little bit there. There's nothing that really tells you, is your kid growing up to be a good human? You just have to put faith in what you're doing and stick with the program. But I do think there's certain things that you can do that will help improve that likelihood. So how do you know if you really are a good parent or if you're completely fucking your kid up for life? It's, like I said, difficult to find that out. There's a lot at play here because it's not just the way that you parent. It's not just what you're doing, but you also have to take into consideration that your child is a human being. As much as you would like to think that they're just kind of an extension of you a lot of times, your child's their own individual person. They have their own personality, their own characteristics, their own character, and that plays a part in how they develop. Another thing that makes everything so difficult and so murky in this area is that there's, especially nowadays, there's so much research, so many Insta moms, so many Insta psychologists. Everyone's got an opinion on how to raise kids, including me, obviously. But a lot of times that research or stuff that you read about how to raise kids can be in conflict with something that's actually really deeply ingrained within you. Your natural instincts as a parent on what you should and shouldn't do. And a lot of times, like I said, those can be in direct conflict with each other. So which route do you go? What do you listen to? Do you listen to the 28-year-old psychologist who doesn't have kids, or do you listen to the 45-year-old mom of 6 who doesn't even have a high school education, right? Where do you line on this one? And like most of the answers that I've come to, very frustrating for a lot of you who are like, just give me a straight fucking answer once in your life, would you? It's not that simple. You can't rely on either of them fully. If you just rely on one or the other and you're not incorporating each philosophy or each recommendation, you're missing out on big aspects of raising your kid. You need to be constantly taking in information and then downloading it, interpreting it, whatever you need to do in order to then implement it with your own children in the way that you best see fit. And even when you do that, it's really difficult. Like being a parent, man, it's just full of highs and lows because you'll watch your kid grow and you love them to death. You're always going to love them. There's nothing that they can do that would make you not love them. I never really understood that before, but now that I have my two kids, there's nothing that they could do that would not make me love them as much as I could possibly love anything. But you also go through, as I'm talking about, am I a good parent? Am I not a good parent? You know, you'll watch your kid grow and strive in certain areas, and you'll be really proud, and you'll see little aspects of it. You're like, hey, that's something that I taught them, or something that I'm really working with them on. And then they'll show this like glimpse of them making strides in that area. You know, they said please by themselves. They said thank you by themselves. Whatever it is, it could be something small or dumb, and you just feel this rush of, you know, pride in the child, but really more so like of just relief of, I'm doing a good job. I'm raising a good person, and this little person is turning into someone that I would like to be friends with. But then the inverse is true as well. You'll see them make strides in one area, and then you'll see them struggle in another area, or take a regression, take, you know, 2 steps forward and then 8 steps back. And that can just be so frustrating because in your mind, you're like, hey, is it just because the kid's a certain age? Is this just a phase? Or is this something that I'm doing that's creating this underlying issue or hardship within my kid, and it's going to have long-term implications down the road with their lives, which is just a fucking scary thought. Just the scariest thought in the world is that there's little things that I could be doing, even if I'm doing it out of love, that could be an underlying issue and creating long-term hardships for my kid. And for all my millennial parents out there, I mean, we've got so many questions, right? You know, I know every generation thinks that they've had it difficult, and every generation has its own struggles. But, you know, some of the things for me that I think about that I struggle with, you know, especially if I see there's something that my child is struggling with or having a hard time with, is, you know, hey, is this my fault? Is it COVID's fault? Is it the lockdown's fault? Is it society's fault? Or at the end of the day, is it no one's fault? And it's just, these are the pains and the struggles that kids go through when they're growing up. How do you know that your kids are going to be okay? Because I think that's what it ultimately comes down to, is like, I just want to know that my kids are okay. I want to make sure that I'm setting them up to be productive members of society, yes, but also setting them up to be happy, to be content, to be the best that they can be. And I guess I won't know that until they actually grow up. And maybe this is just me in this podcast coming to the realization that if I'm constantly worried about, are they going to be okay, I'm going to miss out on the journey along the way. I'm going to miss out on all of the things that make them into the person that they're becoming. So I better just tamper down my own anxiety and my own fears and be there with them on this journey. And I think a lot of times that's what it ends up coming down to as well, is just a lot of these fears that we have. There are fears and there are expectations and there are anxieties. And that's also a question as a parent, is how do you not bring your own expectations, pride, past dreams, anything else that, you know, you may have, and dump that at the feet of your children and push those expectations on them? How do you control your emotions, your feelings, your ambitions, and not transfer that onto your children? Maybe a little bit of what being a good parent is being self-aware and making sure that you're constantly working on yourself and keeping yourself in check, because ultimately you can't control the child. You can't control how they feel. You can't control their emotions. You can't control their temper tantrums. You can't control what they like, what they dislike, if they hate broccoli, if they don't want to play football or baseball and they want to go join the disc frisbee team or something like that, right? You're not going to have any control over that. The only thing that you're going to have control over is your own attitude, what you bring into the relationship, and truly being there for the children as they're growing up. Now, just as kind of an aside, besides the emotional aspect that I've been talking about and some of the fears and struggles that I've had as a parent, and I'm sure that a lot of parents have had prior to me, and I'm sure a lot of parents are having right now. Like I said, if you're a millennial parent, I've got to imagine that there's a good chunk of you that are feeling a lot of these things that I just talked about. And future parents, I don't think this is going away. I think parents are always going to worry about their kids and if what they're doing is, screwing them up for the future. But as I talked about before, you've got a lot of conflicting information out there in terms of, being a good parent. What are you supposed to do? Give them dessert, don't give them dessert, make them sit at the table until they finish their dinner, let them do whatever the fuck they want, climb on the walls, yell at people, break shit, right? What are you supposed to do as a parent? There's handbooks on how to do this parenting thing, but a lot of them have a lot of conflicting information. And so this is more so along the lines of how I feel, and this is my opinion. I am by no means an fully vetted expert on this. I don't have a degree in child psychology. I don't even know if my kids are going to turn out great. They're doing pretty good so far. Sweet little kids. So up until this point, the past 4 or 5 years, I've been doing okay, I think. But as I said, taking a little bit from both sides, the academia, psychology side, as well as some of the instinctual and just parent side of things, they've done studies that show that children are happiest they break it down into 4 categories. And on one axis, you have discipline level or structure. And then on the other one, you have like love level or affection, right? And so it's either no affection, high or low affection, high affection, low discipline, high discipline. And then they basically have 4 quadrants for a combination of all of those together, right? And they found that the happiest children, the most content children, typically come out of a home that have high affection, but also have high discipline or high structure. Children thrive in an environment where they know what's going to be happening, where they have regularity, where they can rely on the parents to be the parent. So as a parent, right, you want to make sure that you're always giving that affection, giving that love. You can't love a child too much. I fucking hate it when people say, don't pick that child up. You're going to spoil them. Don't give them too many hugs. It's like, yeah, that's going to fucking spoil them. Giving them too much hugs and too much love. That's complete horseshit. So whoever gives you that advice, you can go tell them to just fucking kick rocks. That being said, don't conflate giving affection and being loving to your child as letting them do whatever the fuck they want, right? You can't just give them everything that they want. They're going to have disappointments. You can't just let them do stuff that's dangerous. You have to set boundaries with them as well. And I'm not going to lie, this is an area that I struggle with and that I'm working on because I want to give my kids freedom in a lot of areas, especially when it deals with like creativity or getting out and playing with like, my son's really into playing with worms right now, going out and digging in the dirt, making a mess, right? It's hard sometimes for me to create these lines because I want them to have the freedom to do those things, even if it's going to cause more work for me in the end. If it's good for their development, good for them to play, like I don't want my emotions of, fuck, this is going to be a lot of work after they do this to really get in the way of my child having fun and doing things. But I'm getting off the subject there. There has to be structure. There has to be some sort of rules, and there have to be boundaries that you set in place with your children. And that combination of being affectionate, but also having boundaries and telling them no and making sure that they know that they can't just do whatever they want. That's the environment that, according to the research that's been done, at least up until this point, gives you the best chance of having a happy and a content kid. Now, I've gone into a lot of like the emotional and the feeling aspect of what I feel, and then a little bit about, my advice, my feelings on just a general, very broad parenting structure, I guess you would say. To answer the first question, like, how do you know if any of this is working? I just spelled out with supreme confidence what I think is best, but how do I really fucking know? And I don't. And I think that where we come to is that if you're feeling these things, or you're feeling the way I am, or you're worrying about all of these things, maybe just the mere fact that you're thinking those things makes you a good parent. The fact that you're thinking about being a good parent, the fact that you want to be a good parent, and that you're taking the time to read books or listen to podcasts or better yourself in your parenting abilities, I guess you would say. Just that mere fact, that mere want, puts you a step above in terms of the parenting game. Questioning, worrying, all of these things that we're doing when we're raising our kids, right? If we are doing that, that shows that we care about our kids, that we want them to do well, that we want to take care of them, which is more than you can say for every parent, which is a shitty thing to say, but there are some really crappy parents out there, and you've seen them. I've seen them. I'm not sitting here trying to judge or put parent shame on certain people, but we know that they're out there. We know that kids suffer. We know that kids face abuse or neglect or aren't loved. There's a lot of that out there. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're asking these questions and some of this stuff is relatable to you, I think just that mere fact makes you a good parent because you care and you're trying. Now, if you're anything like me, you are going to fuck up. And even if you're not like me, you are going to fuck up. That's just a simple fact of life. You got taxes, death, and fucking up as a parent, right? The three things that are pretty much guaranteed in your life. What can you do about it when you screw up? Do you want to just sit there and be the authoritarian dictator and not admit that you were wrong? Or do you want to treat your kid like they're actually a human being? Which, like I said, it's hard to do that sometimes, especially when they're 3 years old, 4 years old, and they don't know what they want and they haven't learned everything yet. And it's difficult to treat them as like a full human being, but they are. One of the things that you can do when you fuck up is take ownership of that and say you're sorry. Tell your kid, I'm sorry. I screwed up. Mommy or daddy screwed up, and I really do apologize. I'm going to work on not having that happen again. It seems counterintuitive sometimes, and I know that in the past, like all of maybe the Gen X or definitely the fucking boomers are just like, this guy is high off his ass. I don't know what they're pumping him full of out there at 5:30 in the morning to get him up and keep him going, but he is high off his ass and he has no clue what he's talking about. You never apologize to a child. You can think that, but I think that's horseshit. I think that kids deserve to be apologized to, especially when we screw up or we do something that is inappropriate. That's one thing I think that could be also good for you is to take a look, see if when you're doing something, if you lose your temper, if you yell at them for something that's just completely overblown, right? They spill a little bit of milk because they dropped their cup and you just fucking lose your shit because you've just had a day. You can't keep your emotions in check. Apologize. Once you've cooled down and you realize what you did, say, hey, daddy's sorry, mommy's sorry. We shouldn't have gotten so angry at something like that. I love you and I'm going to work on not doing that in the future. It wasn't a you problem. It was a me problem. I was the one who couldn't regulate my emotions. Now, you don't have to say it all exactly like that, right? Because I doubt the kid's going to fucking understand, oh, mommy or daddy's dysregulated. Do it as you see fit. And if you see fit. I'm not telling you how to raise your kids. You could do whatever the hell you want. And what does this ultimately do in terms of taking ownership and apologizing, right? In the moment, when it's a 4-year-old, they're probably not going to give a shit. They're going to be like, oh, okay, cool, I can do what I want again, and just run off and have fun. But as I talked about, if we're constantly worried and thinking about different things and not taking into consideration the fact that our children are growing up, they're going to become full-fledged human beings. If they already are ones, but they're going to become productive members of society. They're going to become adults. They're going to have full-blown conversations. They're going to go to college, or they're not going to go to college. They're going to have a career. They're going to have a family. They are going to grow up one day. By taking ownership and apologizing, what is that really doing? It's fostering a relationship with your child. Yes, children need parents. They don't necessarily need friends. But being a parent means that you have a relationship with your child. And what do you do in relationships? You put work and effort into them so that way they become a strong and resilient thing. And you're going to want that when your children are older. You don't want them to not tell you things. You don't want them to not feel safe with you. You don't want them to be so pissed off at you when they're adults that they don't come around for Christmas, that they don't want you to see their grandkids, that they don't want you involved in the discipline and raising of their children. You need to foster this relationship right now. Kids grow up and we do our best to guide them down this road of life, but at some point it ultimately becomes just them. They're the ones who are going to decide where their life goes. They're going to make the decisions. They're going to make the mistakes. And all that we could do as parents is hope that we guided them enough when they were younger, and that we built a relationship strong enough that when they do struggle when they're older, that they come to us for advice, come to us for help, and they come to us in their times of need. And with COVID and a lot of other things of modern society, social media, the internet, remote work, remote school, we become more and more disconnected. And I don't think that we can do this all on our own. I don't think we were created to do this all on our own. We have our families, we have grandparents. Hopefully you live close to some family that can help out in raising the child and be there for them. But at the end of the day, I think that we need to create a community as well. One that helps each other, one that gives advice, one that gives comfort, one that, you had a hard day, kids go to bed, and you're just sitting there feeling so shitty about how you're raising the kids, and you think that you're just doing a terrible job. You need someone to come over, have a glass of wine, talk about it, not necessarily sit there and coddle you and be like, oh, you're the best parent ever, but truly sit down and talk about it. Talk about what happened, what can you do differently, how can parents really support each other. And it's not just the parents who get the benefit. If you have that community aspect, your kids are going to be friends, and they're going to look at the other adults and see different adults, authority figures within their lives that can help guide them. And they'll get more and more, I guess you would say, that affection from other adults, obviously not to the same extent that you give that love or affection. But if you create this community, it can truly feel like a family outside of the family. And I think that that's great for kids, great for people. It's great for society in general. And I do think that we've lost a lot of that. I've mentioned it before. I don't know how we get it back, but I'm hoping that in some small way that this podcast will eventually become a community in and of itself, to where people can give feedback, people can give support, and not necessarily have it be for the likes or for the image on Instagram or Facebook or something like that. And maybe these are all just a bunch of like high in the sky, apple pie fucking dreams of mine. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. That's what I think would be best for families, for children. And this was just a little bit of the fears and anxieties that I have, and some of my thoughts on raising children as well. And like I said in the beginning, this episode is geared more towards parents and people that are currently parents. But if you're planning on having children, just get ready, because a lot of these fears and anxieties, they're fucking coming your way as well. If you aren't planning on having children, or you're not anywhere close to even thinking about having children yet, this may be where some of your, where your parents came from. Maybe you listen to this episode and you think about the things that I worry about, that I struggle with, and you can go back and think on some of the aspects that you had when you were being raised. Where were your parents at? What were some of the struggles that they had? What are some of the struggles that they have now that you're an adult? They're still your parent, right? They're always going to be your mom or your dad. And hopefully it just gives you a little bit of insight, and maybe it's a conversation starter for you guys. Maybe there's some sort of trauma there or some sort of disconnect. Maybe listening to this and hearing this insight, maybe it gives you a talking point, something that you can kind of jump off of and do a little bit of healing. Either way, I think that it's something that needs to be talked about, and something that needs to be discussed, something that we need to hold together. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the kids are what we do this for, and we need to try and do our best, so that way the kids can grow in a healthy, safe, loving environment and can really become the best that they can be, because ultimately that's what we want. We want our children to hit their maximum potential, be the best human being that they can be. And that'll do it this week for the Unhinged Father podcast. I hope that you enjoyed it. Hope that you were able to take something out of it. If you found anything that was relatable in there, or anything that really kind of stood out to you, or you completely disagree with certain aspects of what I was saying, shoot me a message. If you're on Spotify, it gives you a chance at the end with like a little poll, or what did you think of the episode? Let me know. Let me know if you enjoyed it, if you disagree, if you're indifferent, if you don't have kids, and why the fuck are you talking to me about having kids? I'm never going to have them. I'm going for that dink life. Let me know. I definitely want to hear some of that feedback. On top of that, if you already are, thank you for doing that. If not, give me a follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Feel free to drop a 5-star review in there as well. Does help out if you think the show deserves something like that. And I always ask for it, but if you think there's anyone that would enjoy this show or could benefit from listening to it, or if you really just dislike someone so much and want to completely fuck up their day by giving them this podcast, share it with them, shoot them a message. I think all of the fucking podcast things give you a chance to actually share the episodes with someone. Just hit that little share thing, send it in a text message. But I really do appreciate it. I want to make sure that if this message is something that could benefit someone, that they're able to hear it. And I know that this is a small audience right now. There's like 7 of you diehards out there that just listen to the podcast on a regular basis, and I really do appreciate that. If it can be helpful to someone else that you know or you think that they would benefit from it, please share it with them. And as always, be good, try hard, do your best.